The transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere with a gentle hum that made Sarah Chen's stomach twist. She pressed her forehead against the small window, watching the blue planet grow larger with each passing second. 3 years ago, she had left this world as a scared 17-year-old volunteer. Now at 20, she was coming home as something else entirely. The frontier wars had changed everything. When the Zenthari Empire had pushed into human space, Earth's colonies screamed for help. The military needed bodies, and they needed them fast. Sarah had signed up the day after her birthday. Lying to her parents in a rushed video message sent from the recruitment center, she told them she was doing something important. She told them she would be safe. She told them so many things that turned out to be lies. The shuttle landed with a soft thud at the civilian spaceport in New Seattle. Sarah grabbed her single duffel bag and joined the line of returning soldiers moving toward the exit. Most of them were older, hardened veterans with mechanical limbs and distant stares. She fit right in, even though she still had all her original parts. The scars she carried were deeper than the skin. Her mother was waiting at the arrival gate. Margaret Chen looked smaller than Sarah remembered, her hair now streaked with gray that definitely had not been there 3 years ago. When their eyes met, her mother let out a sob and rushed forward, wrapping Sarah in a crushing embrace that smelled like home and lavender soap. "My baby," her mother whispered, trembling. "My baby came home." Sarah stood stiffly in the hug, her hands hovering uncertainly before finally settling on her mother's back. Physical contact felt strange now. On the frontier, touching someone usually meant dragging them to cover or checking for wounds. Comfort was something she had almost forgotten. "Hey, Mom," Sarah said quietly. "I'm back." The drive home was awkward. Her mother asked 1,000 questions that Sarah could not answer. What was it like out there? Did you make friends? Were you scared? Each question felt like a probe into a wound that had not healed. Sarah gave short, vague responses until her mother finally fell silent, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Their house looked exactly the same blue paint, the same garden gnomes, the same crack in the driveway that her father kept meaning to fix. Sarah stood on the lawn for a long moment, feeling like she was looking at a museum exhibit of her old life. Inside, her father waited with tears in his eyes. David Chen was a solid man who never cried, but he cried now, holding his daughter like she might disappear if he let go. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, just a little. These people loved her. They had missed her. Somehow that made everything worse. Dinner was a careful affair. Her parents had made all her favorite foods, but Sarah found she could not taste any of it properly. Everything was too rich, too complex. For 3 years she had eaten military rations and whatever local food the colonies could spare. Her stomach revolted at the feast and she had to excuse herself twice. "It's okay, sweetie," her mother said, worry creasing her face. "You just need time to adjust." But Sarah knew it was not about adjustment. It was about the fact that she had watched good people starve on Outpost Zeta while she rationed protein bars. It was about knowing what real hunger felt like, and how obscene this abundance seemed in comparison. That night, Sarah lay in her childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to her ceiling. She had put them up when she was 10, mapping out constellations she had only read about. Now she had seen those stars up close. She had bled under alien suns and watched friends die in the cold vacuum of space. The plastic stars felt like a cruel joke. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound made her tense. The house settling, the wind in the trees, the distant hum of traffic all became potential threats in her mind. She caught herself calculating exit routes and tactical positions before forcing her thoughts elsewhere. This was home. She was safe. She needed to believe that. The next morning, her mother dropped the news over breakfast. "We enrolled you back at Lincoln High," she said brightly, as if this was wonderful information. "You can finish your senior year and graduate with your class. Well, not your original class, but you know what I mean. You'll be with kids your own age." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "High school?" She repeated, the words tasting foreign in her mouth. "Yes, honey. You need your diploma, and then you can think about college, maybe find a nice career." Her mother smiled, oblivious to the rising panic in Sarah's chest. "Everything can go back to normal now. You can just be a regular teenager again. A regular teenager." Sarah had held the line at the Battle of Kepler Station when she was 18. She had called in artillery strikes that leveled entire Zenthari battalions. She had carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire, and made life-or-death decisions that haunted her every quiet moment. She had led a squad when her sergeant died, keeping 12 people alive through a 3-day siege with no supplies and no hope, and now they wanted her to go back to high school. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea," Sarah said carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe I could just take an equivalency test or something. Go straight to college or—" "Nonsense," her father interrupted, setting down his coffee. "You deserve a normal senior year. Prom, football games, hanging out with friends, all the things you missed. The school counselor said it would be good for you to reconnect with your peer group." Sarah bit back the dozen responses fighting to escape. Her peer group was dead, scattered across a dozen colony worlds or still fighting in the black. The people she had bled beside would never understand high school drama again, and she could not imagine pretending to care about it either. But her parents looked so hopeful, so desperate to fix the daughter who had come back wrong. They wanted the old Sarah, the one who worried about grades and had crushes on boys and dreamed of becoming a journalist. That Sarah had died somewhere between the recruitment center and her first firefight. This Sarah, the one sitting at their table, was someone else entirely. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll go to school." Her mother's face lit up with relief so profound it made Sarah's chest ache. She would do this for them. She would try to be the daughter they remembered even if it killed her. After everything else she had survived, how hard could high school be? She would find out soon enough. Lincoln High School started the following Monday, and Sarah had exactly 4 days to prepare for a battle she had no idea how to fight. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Sarah stood in front of her closet staring at clothes that belonged to a different person, jeans that were too loose now, band shirts for groups she could not remember liking. Everything felt like a costume designed to help her blend in with civilians who had never heard gunfire or smelled burning metal. She settled on simple dark jeans and a plain gray hoodie, pulling her brown hair into a tight ponytail. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a soldier trying to play dress-up. The eyes staring back at her were too hard, too watchful. No amount of civilian clothing could hide what she had become. Her mother drove her to school, chattering nervously about nothing. Sarah watched the streets roll past, noting sightlines and defensive positions out of habit. When they pulled into the student parking lot, her breath caught. There were hundreds of kids everywhere, laughing and shouting and moving in chaotic patterns that made her tactical sense scream warnings. "Have a wonderful day, sweetie," her mother said, squeezing her hand. "If you need anything, just call. I can come get you any time." Sarah nodded and stepped out of the car. The moment her feet hit the pavement, she felt exposed. Too many people, too many variables, too many potential threats. She forced herself to breathe slowly, counting like her sergeant had taught her. 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds out. It was a technique for staying calm under fire. She never thought she would need it for high school. The front office was a small room that smelled like old paper and coffee. A tired-looking secretary handed Sarah her schedule and a map of the building, barely glancing up from her computer. Sarah studied the map with the same intensity she had once used for mission briefings, memorizing hallways and exits. Her first class was American History in room 204. She climbed the stairs, hyper-aware of every person who passed too close. A boy bumped into her shoulder and Sarah's hand shot out automatically, grabbing his wrist in a combat grip before she even registered what she was doing. "Whoa," the boy yelped, eyes wide. "Sorry, didn't see you there." Sarah released him immediately, horrified. "No, I'm sorry, reflex, I just—" But he was already backing away, giving her a nervous look before disappearing into the crowd. Great Start American History was taught by Mr. Patterson, a balding man in his 50s who seemed genuinely passionate about the Revolutionary War. Sarah slipped into a desk at the back of the room, scanning the other students. They all looked so young, even though most of them were her age. They had soft faces and easy smiles. None of them had the lean, haunted look of people who had seen too much. "All right, class," Mr. Patterson began, standing in front of a digital board. "Today we're continuing our unit on warfare and its impact on society. Can anyone tell me what made the American Revolution successful against a superior military force?" Several hands shot up. Sarah kept hers down, even though she could write a dissertation on asymmetric warfare. Mr. Patterson called on a girl in the front row who talked about French support and local knowledge of terrain. It was not wrong, but it was incomplete. Sarah's fingers drummed against her desk as she bit back the urge to correct every oversimplification. "Very good, Emma," Mr. Patterson said. Now, some historians argue that the colonists' willingness to use unconventional tactics was key. They didn't fight like traditional European armies. They adapted. He paused, looking around the room. Has anyone here had experience with real military strategy? Maybe through family members in the service? Sarah's jaw tightened. Several students glanced her way, and she realized with a sinking feeling that word had already spread. In a school this size, a returning veteran was news. Sarah Chen, right? Mr. Patterson said, spotting her at the back. I was told you recently returned from the frontier wars. Would you like to share any insights? Every eye in the room turned to her. Sarah felt her pulse spike, her hands gripping the desk edge. She could deflect. She could make a joke. She could stay silent. But something stubborn in her refused to hide. Unconventional tactics work when you're outnumbered, she said quietly. But they come with a cost. You take more casualties. You sacrifice positions you can't hold. You make calls that haunt you. She paused, aware that the room had gone completely silent. The colonists won because they were willing to pay that price. Most people aren't until they have no choice. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Mr. Patterson looked like he regretted asking the question. A few students exchanged glances, and Sarah could practically hear them labeling her as damaged, dangerous, different. Thank you for that perspective, Mr. Patterson said finally, his voice gentle. That's something we often forget when we study history. Real people paid for those victories. He turned back to the board, and Sarah felt the attention slowly shift away from her. The rest of the class passed in a blur. When the bell rang, Sarah gathered her things quickly, hoping to escape before anyone tried to talk to her. She almost made it. Hey, wait up. Sarah turned to see a girl with bright red hair and curious green eyes jogging toward her. She wore a vintage band shirt and had an easy confidence that reminded Sarah of her former squad mate, Torres, who had died on Europa. I'm Kelsey, the girl said, falling into step beside Sarah. That was pretty intense back there. Were you really in the war? Yes, Sarah said shortly, not slowing down. What was it like? Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Kelsey. The girl took a half step back at whatever she saw in Sarah's expression. It was like everything you hope you never experience, Sarah said flatly. Can I go to my next class now? Kelsey's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, but she did not leave. Right, sorry. That was insensitive. I just think it's amazing, you know. You're like a hero. You fought for all of us, hero. The word made Sarah's stomach turn. Heroes were what politicians called soldiers when they needed public support. Heroes were propaganda. Real soldiers were just people trying not to die while following orders that often made no sense. I'm not a hero, Sarah said. I'm just trying to graduate. Excuse me. She walked away before Kelsey could respond, navigating the crowded hallway toward her next class. Chemistry. At least that would be straightforward. Mix this with that. Follow the formula, get a predictable result. Nothing like the chaos of actual combat where everything went wrong and you had to improvise with whatever you had. But as she slid into another back row desk, Sarah realized something unsettling. The carefully controlled environment of a chemistry lab reminded her of ordnance disposal. One wrong move and everything exploded. She had spent 6 months attached to an engineering unit, learning to disarm Xanthari plasma charges. The smell of the lab, the precise measurements, the potential for disaster triggered memories she had been trying to suppress. Her hands started to shake. She pressed them flat against the desk, forcing them to be still. Not here, not now. She could not fall apart in the middle of chemistry class. But the fluorescent lights were too bright, the sounds too loud. And suddenly she was back on Titan Station, watching the countdown on a charge that would not disarm, screaming at her team to run. The explosion that followed swallowing screams and light and everything else. Miss Chen? Sarah blinked. The chemistry teacher, a young woman named Ms. Rodriguez, was standing beside her desk, concern written across her face. The rest of the class was staring. Sarah realized she had been somewhere else entirely, her breathing harsh and her vision tunneled. I need to leave, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. I'm sorry. I need to leave. She walked out of the classroom, ignoring Ms. Rodriguez calling after her. The hallway was empty during class time, and Sarah found the nearest bathroom, locking herself in a stall. She slid down the wall, hugging her knees to her chest, and focused on breathing. Just breathing, in and out. She was on Earth. She was safe. There were no plasma charges, no enemies, no danger. But her body did not believe it. Her body still remembered how to prepare for threats that no longer existed, and Sarah realized with horrifying clarity that coming back from war was not the end of the battle. It was just a different kind of fight, one she had no idea how to win. Sarah sat in that bathroom stall for the rest of the period, listening to the muffled sounds of classes changing through the walls. When the bell rang and voices flooded the hallway, she waited until the noise died down before emerging. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes making her look older than 20. She splashed cold water on her face and straightened her shoulders. She had survived worse than a panic attack in a chemistry lab. She could do this. She had to do this for her parents, if nothing else. They had already lost 3 years with their daughter. The least she could do was try to give them the normal life they desperately wanted for her. Her next class was English literature, and Sarah arrived late, sliding into the only available seat near the front. The teacher, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Harper, gave her a pointed look but said nothing. They were discussing a novel Sarah had never read, something about a dystopian future where teenagers fought to the death for entertainment. The author uses violence as a metaphor, Mrs. Harper was saying, gesturing to a passage on the display screen. The protagonist must maintain her humanity, even as she's forced into increasingly brutal situations. What do you think the message is here about the cost of survival? A blonde girl in designer clothes raised her hand. I think it's saying that even when we have to do bad things, we can still choose to be good people inside. Like violence doesn't have to define us. Several students nodded in agreement. Sarah felt something hot and bitter rise in her throat. These kids were talking about violence like it was a philosophical concept, something to debate in a classroom. They had no idea what they were saying, no understanding of what violence actually cost. That's naive, Sarah said, the words escaping before she could stop them. The room went quiet. Mrs. Harper raised an eyebrow. Would you like to elaborate, Miss Chen? Sarah could feel everyone staring at her again, but she was too tired to care anymore. Violence always defines you. Every time you hurt someone, even if you have a good reason, it changes you. You can't just decide to be a good person inside while doing bad things outside. It doesn't work like that. The blood doesn't wash off just because you feel guilty about it. The blonde girl looked offended. It's just a book. The author is making a point about maintaining your values under pressure. The author never killed anyone, Sarah said flatly. Anyone who writes about violence like it's some noble struggle has never had to live with what it actually does to you. There's no humanity in combat. There's just survival, and the things you do to achieve it and the person you become afterward. Mrs. Harper cleared her throat gently. Those are certainly strong feelings, Sarah. But let's remember that literature allows us to explore difficult themes safely, through metaphor and fiction. Not everyone has direct experience with violence, and that's a good thing. Stories help us develop empathy and understanding. Empathy, Sarah repeated, almost laughing. You can't empathize with something you've never experienced. You can sympathize, maybe. Feel sorry for people. But you don't understand. None of you understand. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah saw the other students exchanging uncomfortable glances, and Mrs. Harper's expression shifted from patient to concerned. Sarah had crossed some invisible line, revealed too much of the darkness she carried. Perhaps we should take a break, Mrs. Harper said carefully. Sarah, could you step outside with me for a moment? Sarah followed the teacher into the empty hallway, her hands shoved deep in her hoodie pockets. Mrs. Harper closed the door behind them and leaned against the wall, studying Sarah with kind but worried eyes. I know you've been through something difficult, Mrs. Harper said gently, and I want you to know that this is a safe space for you. But you're scaring the other students. They don't know how to respond to that level of intensity. I'm not trying to scare anyone, Sarah said, exhaustion making her voice rough. I'm just telling the truth. Your truth, Mrs. Harper corrected. Which is valid, but it's not the only truth. These kids are allowed to engage with literature on its own terms, even if they haven't experienced war. That's the whole point of reading, to expand our understanding beyond our direct experience. Sarah wanted to argue, but she was too tired. What was the point? These people lived in a different world, one where violence was theoretical and war was something that happened far away to other people. She could not bridge that gap anymore. Then she could explain colors to someone who had been blind from birth. Can I just go? Sarah asked. I don't think I'm in the right headspace for class today. Mrs. Harper hesitated, then nodded. Go to the counselor's office. Ms. Reeves is expecting you anyway. I'll send her a message that you're coming. Of course there was a counselor. Sarah should have known her parents would arrange that. She found the counseling office on the first floor, a small room with motivational posters and comfortable chairs that were probably supposed to make students feel at ease. Ms. Reeves was a woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and an expression of professional concern. Sarah, come in, Ms. Reeves said, gesturing to a chair. I'm glad you're here. Your parents mentioned you might have some difficulty adjusting to school after your time in service. Sarah sat stiffly, her posture military straight. I'm fine. Are you? Ms. Reeves asked, not unkindly. Because I've already had 2 teachers message me about incidents in your classes today, and it's only lunchtime. Sarah said nothing. What could she say that would not make things worse? Ms. Reeves leaned forward, her voice gentle. Sarah, what you're experiencing is completely normal for someone returning from combat. It's called reintegration difficulty. The military should have provided you with resources when you were discharged. They did, Sarah said. Pamphlets, hotline numbers, a therapist I saw twice before I shipped home. None of it helps. They can't make me forget. The goal isn't to make you forget, Ms. Reeves said. It's to help you process what you experienced, so it doesn't control your present. Have you thought about joining a support group? There are several in the area for young veterans. I don't want to sit in a circle and share my feelings with strangers, Sarah said sharply. I just want to get through the day without people looking at me like I'm a bomb about to explode. Then let's work on coping strategies, Ms. Reeves suggested. Ways to manage stress and anxiety in the moment. Grounding techniques, breathing exercises, safe spaces you can go when you're feeling overwhelmed. Sarah almost laughed. Breathing exercises. As if the problem was that she had forgotten how to breathe properly, and not that she had seen things that could not be unseen, done things that could not be undone. But Ms. Reeves was trying to help, and Sarah did not have the energy to fight anymore. Fine, Sarah said. Whatever you think will help. They spent the rest of the hour talking about strategies that Sarah already knew did not work. When the bell rang for lunch, Ms. Reeves sent her off with an appointment card for later in the week, and an encouraging smile that felt like pity. The cafeteria was a nightmare of noise and chaos. Sarah grabbed a tray of food she would not eat and found an empty table in the corner, as far from the main crowd as possible. She sat with her back to the wall, watching the room out of habit. Threat assessment, escape routes, safe zones, old instincts that had no place in a high school lunchroom. Is this seat taken? Sarah looked up to see a tall boy with dark skin and intelligent eyes standing beside her table. He held his tray casually, not invading her space, giving her room to refuse. It's empty, Sarah said, which was not exactly an invitation but not a rejection either. The boy sat down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. I'm Marcus, he said. I was in your history class this morning. That thing you said about asymmetric warfare was interesting. Sarah studied him suspiciously. What do you want? Nothing, Marcus said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Just thought you might want someone to sit with who isn't going to ask you a million questions about the war or treat you like you're about to snap. My older brother served. He came back different too. I get it. Something in Sarah's chest loosened slightly. Your brother okay? Getting there, Marcus said. It took a while. Still takes a while some days, but he's managing. He paused, meeting her eyes. You will too. It just takes time. Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someday this crushing weight would lift, that she would feel normal again. But she had lost too many people to believe in happy endings anymore. Still, Marcus sat there calmly eating his lunch, not demanding anything from her, and that was more kindness than she had experienced all day. Thanks, Sarah said quietly. No problem, Marcus replied. Welcome back to the world of teenagers worried about tests and drama instead of staying alive. It's weird here, but it's not all bad. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. It was a start. The rest of the week crawled by in a haze of difficult moments and small victories. Sarah learned to anticipate her triggers. Loud noises sent her into defensive mode, so she started wearing earplugs between classes. Crowds made her anxious, so she memorized the quiet routes through the building. The smell of certain cleaning chemicals reminded her of field hospitals, so she avoided the freshly mopped hallways until they dried. Marcus became an unexpected ally. He did not push her to talk or try to fix her, which made him easier to be around than most people. They fell into a routine of eating lunch together, often in comfortable silence. Sometimes his friends would join them, other students who treated Sarah with casual acceptance rather than morbid curiosity or fearful distance. On Thursday, a girl named Priya sat down at their table with an easy smile. She had dark hair pulled into a messy bun and wore a robotics club shirt. "Marcus tells me you're good with engineering," Priya said, stealing one of Marcus's chips. "We could use someone with practical experience on our competition team. Interested?" Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been interest. She had enjoyed her time with the engineering unit, the puzzle of making things work under impossible conditions. "What kind of competition?" "Regional Robotics Championship," Priya explained, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "We have to build a robot that can navigate an obstacle course and complete specific tasks. It's basically problem-solving under pressure with limited resources." "Sound familiar?" "Maybe too familiar," Sarah said, but she found herself considering it. Having a project might help, something to focus on that was challenging but not life-threatening. "When do you meet?" "After school, 3 days a week in the tech lab. Come check it out if you want. No pressure." Priya grinned. "Well, some pressure. The competition is in 6 weeks and our robot currently moves like a drunk penguin. But that's engineering, right?" Despite everything, Sarah felt her lips twitch into something almost like a smile. "I'll think about it." That afternoon, instead of going straight home, Sarah found herself walking toward the tech lab. Through the window, she could see a dozen students clustered around a workbench, arguing cheerfully over a mechanical frame that looked like it had been assembled by someone with more enthusiasm than skill. The scene reminded her of her old squad during downtime, the easy camaraderie of people working toward a common goal. She pushed open the door. The conversation stopped, and everyone turned to look at her. Sarah's instinct was to retreat, but Priya was already waving her over. "Guys, this is Sarah. She's got actual field engineering experience. Sarah, this is the team." Priya rattled off names that Sarah immediately forgot, too focused on the robot frame to care about memorizing faces. "What do you think? Be honest. We can take it." Sarah walked around the workbench, studying the design with a critical eye. The frame was solid enough, but the weight distribution was wrong. The motor placement would create torquey issues. The joint assemblies were overcomplicated, more points of failure than necessary. She had seen this kind of mistake before. Engineers trying to build something perfect instead of something functional. "It won't work," Sarah said bluntly. Several team members bristled. A stocky boy with glasses crossed his arms defensively. "We've been working on this design for months. The simulations say it's sound." "Simulations don't account for real-world stress," Sarah said, pointing to the joint assemblies. "These look great on paper, but they'll seize up under load. You need simpler designs, fewer moving parts. And your center of gravity is too high. This thing will tip the first time it tries to turn quickly." "She's right," Marcus said from the doorway. Sarah had not heard him come in. He walked over to the robot, examining it with fresh eyes. "We've been so focused on making it sophisticated that we forgot it needs to actually work." The team exchanged glances, some annoyed, others thoughtful. Finally, Priya laughed. "Okay, field expert, show us what we're doing wrong. But fair warning, if you point out the problems, you're helping us fix them. That's the rule." Sarah hesitated. This would mean commitment, showing up regularly, being part of something. It meant letting people rely on her, which terrified her more than she wanted to admit. But it also meant having a purpose, a mission that was not about survival. It meant building something instead of destroying things. "Fine," Sarah said, "but we're redesigning from scratch. This frame is a lost cause." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah found herself falling into a rhythm she had not felt since leaving the service. She sketched new designs, explaining the principles of functional engineering under pressure. Keep it simple. Redundancy over complexity. Test every component before integrating it into the system. The team listened, some skeptical at first but gradually warming as they saw her ideas take shape. By the time the janitor came to lock up, they had a new design framework and a work plan. Sarah felt exhausted but satisfied in a way she had not experienced since coming home. This was something she could do, something she was good at that did not involve weapons or death. Same time tomorrow? Priya asked as they packed up. Yeah, Sarah said. Same time. Walking home, Sarah felt lighter somehow. The weight had not disappeared, but it felt more manageable. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it just took time and finding the right things to focus on. Her good mood lasted until she got home and found her mother crying at the kitchen table. Her father sat beside her, his expression grim. When they saw Sarah, her mother tried to compose herself, wiping at her tears. What happened? Sarah asked, her heart rate spiking. Threats, danger, what had gone wrong? We got a call from the school, her father said heavily. Several teachers expressed concerns about your behavior. They said you've been disruptive, confrontational. The counselor recommended additional therapy, possibly medication for anxiety. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the gut. I'm trying, she said, her voice tight. I'm really trying. I joined a club today. I'm making friends. I'm doing everything you asked. We know, sweetie, her mother said, reaching for Sarah's hand. But maybe you need more help than we can give you. There's a residential treatment program for young veterans, a place where you could work through your trauma with professionals who understand combat stress. You want to send me away? Sarah asked, pulling her hand back. I just got home. I've been back less than a week and you already want to ship me off to some facility? It's not like that, her father said. We just want you to get better. The person who came back is not the daughter we remember. That's because she's dead, Sarah shouted, surprising herself with the force of her words. The girl you remember died on Titan Station when a plasma charge went off too close. She died on Europa when her best friend took a shot meant for her. She died 1,000 times in 1,000 small ways, and you can't get her back by sending me to therapy or pretending everything is fine. Her parents stared at her, shock and hurt written across their faces. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had not cried in 3 years, and she was not going to start now. I know I'm not who you wanted me to be, Sarah said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. But I'm trying. I really am. Just please, give me more time. Don't give up on me yet. Her mother stood and wrapped Sarah in a hug, sobbing into her shoulder. We're not giving up on you. We could never give up on you. We just don't know how to help. Let me figure it out, Sarah whispered. Let me find my own way back. It won't be to who I was before, but maybe I can find someone new, someone better. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about Marcus and his quiet acceptance. She thought about Priya and the robotics team, working together toward a goal that mattered to them. She thought about Ms. Reeves and her well-meaning advice and her parents' desperate desire to fix what was broken. Maybe they were all right in different ways. Maybe healing was not about going back to who she was before, but about building something new from the pieces that remained. Like the robot, she could not just follow the original blueprint. She had to redesign from the foundation, keeping what was essential and letting go of what no longer served her. It would not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But Sarah had survived the frontier wars. She had endured things that would have broken most people. If she could survive that, maybe she could survive this too. Maybe she could find a way to live with the ghosts that haunted her, to build a life that honored both who she had been and who she had become. Tomorrow, she would go back to school. She would work on the robot. She would try one more day to bridge the gap between the world of war and the world of peace, and maybe eventually she would find solid ground somewhere in between. 2 weeks passed and Sarah fell into an uneasy routine. School remained difficult, but the robotics lab became her sanctuary. Working with her hands, solving concrete problems with measurable solutions, gave her mind something to focus on besides the memories that lurked in every quiet moment. The team had accepted her expertise, and she found herself looking forward to those afternoon sessions in a way she had not anticipated. The robot was taking shape. They called it Prometheus, and Sarah had to admit it looked impressive. Clean lines, efficient design, redundant systems where they mattered. It moved smoothly through test runs, and the team's spirits were high as the competition approached. But school itself remained a minefield. In government class, a debate about military intervention had turned heated when Sarah pointed out the disconnect between political theory and battlefield reality. The teacher had praised her unique perspective while her classmates looked uncomfortable. In the hallway, younger students sometimes pointed and whispered, "The girl who went to war. The one who came back different." Sarah tried to ignore it, but the constant attention wore on her. She felt like an exhibit in a museum, something to be studied and discussed but never truly understood. Only with Marcus and the robotics team did she feel something close to normal, and even then she was careful to keep most of herself hidden. On a Friday afternoon, Sarah was working on Prometheus's navigation system when Kelsey, the red-haired girl from history class, appeared in the doorway of the tech lab. She had kept her distance since their first encounter, but now she approached Sarah with determined purpose. "Can we talk?" Kelsey asked. "Outside, maybe?" Sarah glanced at Priya, who nodded encouragingly. With reluctance, Sarah followed Kelsey out into the empty hallway. They walked in silence until they reached the outdoor courtyard, a small area with benches and struggling plants. "I wanted to apologize," Kelsey said, sitting down on a bench. "For that first day, I was being insensitive, treating you like some kind of celebrity instead of a person. My mom pointed out that I was being an idiot." Sarah remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "It's fine." "It's not, actually," Kelsey continued. "I've been thinking about what you said about not being a hero, and I did some research. I found articles about the Frontier Wars, about Titan Station and Europa, about the things that happened there." She looked up at Sarah, her green eyes serious. "I'm sorry for what you had to go through, and I'm sorry that people like me made it worse by not understanding." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. She sat down beside Kelsey, suddenly tired. "You couldn't have known. Most people here don't want to know. They want to believe war is something noble and distant, not bloody and traumatic." "My cousin is thinking about enlisting," Kelsey said quietly. "He's 17, full of ideas about duty and adventure. I tried to talk to him about what I learned, but he thinks I'm overreacting. He thinks it'll be different for him." "It's always different until it's not," Sarah said. "Then it's all the same. Fear and chaos and desperate attempts to keep yourself and your squad alive." She paused, surprised at herself for opening up. "What did your mother say?" "About me?" Kelsey smiled slightly. "She's a veteran. Served in the colony conflicts 15 years ago. She said that when soldiers come home, they need space to figure out who they are now. That pushing them to be who they were before is cruel, because that person doesn't exist anymore, and that the best thing civilians can do is listen without trying to fix everything." "Your mom sounds smart," Sarah said. "She has her moments," Kelsey agreed. "She also said if you ever want to talk to someone who gets it, she's available. No pressure, just an offer." She handed Sarah a small card with a name and contact information. "I know you're working with the school counselor, but sometimes it helps to talk to someone who has actually been there." Sarah took the card, tucking it into her pocket. She did not know if she would use it, but the gesture meant something. "Thanks, and for what it's worth, your apology means a lot." "Most people don't bother. Most people are cowards," Kelsey said with a grin. "Including me, usually. But you're pretty intimidating, and facing scary things builds character, right?" Despite herself, Sarah laughed. It was a short, rusty sound, but it was genuine. "Is that what I am, scary?" "Terrifying," Kelsey confirmed cheerfully. "But also kind of amazing. The way you redesigned that robot in like 2 hours? The robotics team won't shut up about it. Priya says you're a genius. I'm not a genius. I just know what works under pressure." Sarah stood, feeling oddly lighter. "I should get back to work. Competition is next week, and we still have calibration issues. Can I watch sometime?" Kelsey asked. "I'm not engineering-minded, but it seems interesting," Sarah considered. Letting people in was risky. They could see too much, ask too many questions, remind her of everything she wanted to forget. But isolation was its own kind of death, and she was tired of fighting alone. "Sure," Sarah said. "Monday after school. Just don't touch anything unless Priya says it's okay. She's very protective of Prometheus." Over the weekend, Sarah found herself thinking about Kelsey's mother. She pulled out the card several times, staring at the name. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, licensed therapist, military trauma specialist. Finally, on Sunday evening, Sarah sent a message through the contact portal. Just a simple introduction and a request for information. She did not commit to anything, but leaving the door open felt like progress. Monday brought a new challenge. The school announced a Veterans Day assembly. and the administration wanted Sarah to speak. Mr. Patterson approached her in history class, his expression apologetic but hopeful. "I know this is a lot to ask," he said, "but having a student veteran share their experience would be meaningful for the school community. Just a few minutes talking about what service means to you." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, standing in front of the entire school, exposing herself to judgment and questions and empty platitudes about heroism. Sounded like torture, but she thought about Kelsey's cousin, the 17-year-old boy full of dangerous ideas about glory. She thought about all the kids who might enlist because they believed the stories instead of the reality. "I'll do it," Sarah said, "but I'm going to tell the truth. No sanitized version, no patriotic speeches. If they want me to speak, they get honesty." Mr. Patterson hesitated, then nodded. "I trust you to do what's right." The assembly was scheduled for Friday. Sarah had 4 days to figure out what to say, how to compress 3 years of hell into a speech that would not traumatize an auditorium full of teenagers, but would convey the weight of what service actually meant. She spent her evenings writing and rewriting, filling pages with memories and crossing them out, searching for words that could bridge the gap between her experience and their understanding. It was harder than any engineering problem, trying to translate horror into language that mattered. On Wednesday, Dr. Martinez responded to her message with a warm invitation to talk whenever Sarah was ready. They scheduled a video call for Thursday evening. Sarah spent the day nervous, wondering if she was ready to truly unpack everything she had been carrying. The call lasted 2 hours. Dr. Martinez did not try to fix Sarah or tell her everything would be fine. She listened, asked careful questions, and validated feelings Sarah had been taught to suppress. By the end, Sarah felt wrung out but strangely clearer, like fog had lifted just enough to see a few steps ahead. "You're doing better than you think," Dr. Martinez said. "The fact that you're trying, that you're engaging with life instead of shutting down, that takes incredible strength. Don't let anyone tell you that struggling means you're failing." "It feels like failure," Sarah admitted. "I'm supposed to be strong. I survived the war. I shouldn't fall apart over high school." "Strength isn't about never falling apart," Dr. Martinez said gently. "It's about putting yourself back together afterward, over and over again. You're doing that. Keep doing that." Thursday night, Sarah finalized her speech. It was raw and honest and probably too intense, but it was true. She practiced it once, stumbled through the emotional parts, and decided not to practice again. If she was going to do this, it had to come from somewhere genuine, not rehearsed. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Sarah dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were neat but not military, professional but not stiff. She wanted to look like herself, whoever that was now. The assembly was scheduled for third period. When the time came, Sarah walked to the auditorium on numb legs, her speech notes clutched in her hand. Marcus caught her in the hallway and squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this," he said. "Just speak from the heart. That's all anyone can ask." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She waited backstage while the principal gave opening remarks about honoring veterans and the importance of service. Then her name was called, and she walked out onto the stage, facing an auditorium full of expectant faces. For a moment, Sarah's mind went blank. The crowd, the lights, the attention felt overwhelming. But then she saw Marcus in the third row, giving her an encouraging nod. She saw Priya and the robotics team sitting together, showing their support. She saw Kelsey with her phone raised, probably recording this for her mother, and Sarah began to speak. 3 years ago, I left this school as a stupid kid who thought war was something noble. I came back as someone who knows better. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that serving was heroic or that I'm proud of everything I did. War is not glorious. It's terrifying and messy, and it breaks you in ways that don't heal properly. She paused, watching the audience shift uncomfortably. Good. They should be uncomfortable. But I'm also not going to tell you that service is meaningless, or that the people who fight are victims. We made choices, some good and some terrible, and we live with them. What I want you to understand is that when soldiers come home, we're not the same people who left. And that's okay. It has to be okay because we can't go back. Sarah looked down at her notes, then crumpled them up. She did not need them anymore. If you're thinking about enlisting, understand what you're signing up for. Talk to real veterans, not recruiters. Understand that you might come back different, and that's a price you have to be willing to pay. And if you know someone who served, don't treat them like heroes or victims. Just treat them like people who are trying to find their way back to a life that makes sense. That's all any of us want." The auditorium was silent. Sarah stood there for a moment, then walked off stage, her heart pounding. She had no idea if what she said made any difference, but she had told the truth. That had to count for something. The aftermath of the assembly was strange. Some students avoided Sarah more than before, as if her honesty had confirmed their fears that she was too damaged to approach. But others started treating her differently, with a kind of respect that felt less like worship and more like understanding. A junior whose father had served in the colony wars thanked her quietly in the hallway. A teacher who had lost a brother on Europa nodded at her with knowing sadness. The principal called Sarah to his office after school. She went expecting trouble, but Mr. Dawson simply offered her a tired smile and said, "That took courage. Not the speech they wanted, perhaps, but the one they needed to hear. Thank you." The robotics competition was the next day, and the team spent Friday evening doing final checks on Prometheus. The robot performed beautifully in testing, moving through the obstacle course with precision. Sarah felt a surge of pride watching it work, this thing they had built together from scratch and determination. "We've got a real shot at winning this," Priya said, grinning as she watched Prometheus navigate a series of tight turns. "And it's mostly because of you. You know that, right?" "It's because of all of us," Sarah corrected. "I just helped optimize what you already built." "Don't be modest." "It's annoying," Marcus said, appearing with a box of pizza for the team. "Take credit for your work. You're good at this." Sarah accepted a slice, feeling something warm settle in her chest. This was what she had been missing. The camaraderie of working toward a shared goal with people who valued her contribution. It was not the same as the bonds forged in combat, but it was real and it mattered. Saturday morning, the team loaded Prometheus into Marcus's father's van and drove to the regional competition center. The place was packed with teams from schools across the state, all showcasing robots of varying sophistication. Sarah felt her competitive instinct kick in, assessing the competition with the same tactical eye she once used for battlefield analysis. Their first few runs were solid, but not spectacular. Prometheus completed the course efficiently, but other robots posted faster times. During the lunch break, Sarah studied the course layout, noting where they were losing seconds. She suggested minor adjustments to their programming, tiny optimizations that might give them an edge. "You sure about this?" Priya asked, looking nervous. "If we mess with the code now and something breaks, we're out of the competition." "I'm sure," Sarah said. "Trust me, it was a lot to ask." They had worked for weeks on this robot, and she was asking them to gamble everything on her instincts. But Priya nodded, and the team spent their lunch break reprogramming Prometheus's navigation algorithms based on Sarah's observations. Their afternoon run was spectacular. Prometheus moved through the course like water flowing downhill, every movement precise and efficient. When they crossed the finish line, the timer showed a new leading time. The team erupted in cheers, and Sarah found herself pulled into a group hug that she did not entirely hate. They held the lead through 3 more rounds. By the final run, Sarah was on her feet, watching with the kind of intensity she once reserved for tactical situations. When Prometheus completed the course and the scoreboard confirmed their victory, Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes for the first time since coming home. "We did it," Kelsey screamed, having joined them as a spectator. "You guys actually won." The awards ceremony was a blur. Sarah stood with her team as they accepted the first-place trophy, listening to congratulatory speeches that barely registered. What registered was the way Priya kept looking at the trophy with wonder, the way Marcus grinned like a kid on his birthday, the way the whole team radiated joy over something they had built together. This was what winning was supposed to feel like. Not survival, not relief that you lived through another day, but genuine accomplishment. It felt strange and wonderful, and Sarah wanted to hold on to it for as long as possible. That evening, Sarah's parents took her and the team out for a celebration dinner. Her mother kept tearing up with pride, and her father kept telling anyone who would listen about his daughter, the engineer. It was embarrassing, but it was also kind of nice, seeing them happy and proud instead of worried and sad. "I'm sorry about earlier," her mother said quietly, while the others were debating dessert options. "About suggesting the treatment facility. I was scared and didn't know how to help. But I can see you're finding your way. I should have trusted you to do that." "I was scared too," Sarah admitted. Still am sometimes. But I'm figuring it out, slowly. That's all we can ask for, her father said, joining the conversation. Slow progress is still progress. We're proud of you, Sarah. Not just for winning today, but for surviving and trying to live despite everything you've been through. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone with the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. This person who had survived war and was now surviving peace. She looked less tired than she had a few weeks ago. The dark circles were still there, but something in her eyes seemed lighter, less haunted. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Martinez. Heard about your win today. Congratulations. Building something is powerful medicine. Keep building. Sarah typed back a quick thank you, then paused. On impulse, she pulled up the video Kelsey had posted of her speech. Comments filled the screen, a mix of supportive and critical. But one comment caught her eye from a username she did not recognize. Thank you for this. I'm a vet from the colony wars, and I've been struggling to explain to my family what I've been going through. This helps. You're not alone. Sarah stared at the comment for a long moment. She was not alone. There were others out there fighting the same battle, trying to bridge the same impossible gap between who they were and who they had become. Maybe that was the point. Maybe healing was not about doing it perfectly or doing it alone. Maybe it was about finding others in the darkness and walking forward together. Monday morning, Sarah walked into school with her head held a little higher. The stairs did not bother her as much. She had spoken her truth, built something worthwhile, and survived another week. Small victories, but they were adding up. In history class, Mr. Patterson pulled her aside. I got an email from a veterans organization. They saw the video of your speech and want to know if you'd be interested in speaking at a conference for young veterans. It would be in 2 months and they'd cover all expenses. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, but she thought about that comment on the video, about someone else finding comfort in her words. She thought about all the other veterans out there struggling alone, thinking they were the only ones who could not fit back into civilian life. Let me think about it, Sarah said. Take your time, Mr. Patterson replied. But for what it's worth, I think you have something important to say. Not everyone can articulate the veteran experience the way you did. That's a gift, even if it comes from a difficult place. During lunch, Sarah sat with Marcus and the expanded group that now included Kelsey and several other students. They talked about normal things, stupid things, things that had nothing to do with war or trauma or trying to hold yourself together. Sarah found herself laughing at a terrible joke Marcus made. This sounds strange but not unwelcome. You seem happier, Kelsey observed. More relaxed. I'm working on it, Sarah said. Some days are better than others. That's all any of us can say, Kelsey replied. Nobody has it figured out completely. We're all just making it up as we go. That afternoon, Sarah went to her session with Ms. Reeves. The counselor noticed the change immediately. You look different, she said. What happened? Sarah told her about the robotics competition, about the speech, about the small ways she was learning to exist in this world again. Ms. Reeves listened with genuine warmth, nodding along. This is good progress, Sarah. You're engaging with life instead of just surviving it. That's a crucial distinction. She paused. Have you thought any more about the Veterans Support Group I mentioned? Actually, I have, Sarah said. She pulled out Dr. Martinez's card. I've been talking to someone who specializes in military trauma. It helps having someone who understands, but I think I'm ready to try the group too. It might be good to connect with other people my age who are going through the same thing. I can get you the information, Ms. Reeves said, looking pleased. The group meets Thursday evenings and it's specifically for veterans under 25. Very informal, very supportive. Sarah left the counseling office feeling lighter. She was building a support network piece by piece. It would not fix everything, but it was a foundation to build on. That evening, Sarah sat down with her laptop and opened a blank document. She started writing about her experiences, not for an assignment or a speech, but for herself. She wrote about Titan Station and Europa, about the friends she had lost and the moments that haunted her. She wrote about coming home and feeling alien in her own life. She wrote about robotics and Marcus and learning to laugh again. The words poured out in a messy stream of consciousness, unfiltered and raw. When she finally stopped hours later, she had written 15 pages. It was not polished or organized, but it was honest. It was her story, in her words, without trying to make it palatable for anyone else. She saved the document and leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. This was another form of building, constructing a narrative that made sense of the chaos. Maybe someday she would share it. Maybe not. Either way, it was progress. Sarah glanced at the calendar on her wall. She had been home for almost a month now. 4 weeks of struggling and surviving and slowly, painfully learning to live again. It had been harder than any battle she fought in the war in some ways. But she was still here, still fighting, still building. Tomorrow she would go to school. She would work on the next robotics project. She would attend her first veterans group meeting on Thursday. She would continue therapy with Dr. Martinez. She would take it one day at a time, building a life that honored both who she had been and who she was becoming. The girl who came back from war was not the girl who had left. But maybe, just maybe, she was becoming someone even stronger, someone who had survived hell and chosen to keep living anyway. And that, Sarah decided, was its own kind of victory. 3 months had passed since Sarah returned home, and the world felt different now. Not easier exactly, but more manageable. The sharp edges of her trauma had not disappeared, but she had learned to navigate around them, to recognize when she was spiraling and pull herself back before falling too far. Thursday evening veterans group had become a cornerstone of her week. The group was small, just 7 young veterans ranging from 19 to 24, each carrying their own invisible wounds. They met in a community center basement that smelled like coffee and old carpet, sitting in a circle of mismatched chairs that somehow felt safer than any therapist's office. Tonight, Sarah was facilitating the discussion. They rotated leadership each week, and it was her turn to guide the conversation. The others looked to her expectantly, and she took a deep breath before beginning. "Let's talk about moments we felt human this week," Sarah said. "Not soldiers, not veterans, just people living their lives." Marcus, a different Marcus from the one at school, this one a 23-year-old who had served on the Martian front, spoke first. "I went to a concert. A real concert with a crowd and loud music. I expected it to trigger me, but it didn't. I just enjoyed the music. That felt human." Around the circle, others shared their small victories, dancing in their kitchen, laughing at a comedy show, having a conversation about politics without relating it to combat strategy. These were the markers of recovery, tiny moments of normalcy that felt like monumental achievements. When it was Sarah's turn, she smiled. "I cried watching a movie, not because it reminded me of anything traumatic, just because it was sad. Regular human emotions for regular human reasons. It felt good to cry about something that wasn't war." After the meeting, several group members lingered talking in the parking lot. Sarah had become close with 2 of them, Jennifer and David, both 21 and recently discharged. They understood her in ways that civilians never could, speaking a shared language of dark humor and unspoken understanding. "You going to that veterans conference next month?" Jennifer asked, leaning against her car. "The one where you're speaking?" "Yeah," Sarah confirmed. She had accepted the invitation to speak at the conference, and the date was approaching fast. Nervous about it, though. Speaking at my high school was one thing. This is a room full of veterans who have seen worse than I have. "They've seen different, not worse," David corrected gently. "Stop measuring trauma." It's not a competition, he was right, of course. That was something Dr. Martinez had been working on with Sarah, helping her stop minimizing her own experiences by comparing them to others. Suffering was not a hierarchy. Her pain was valid even if someone else had suffered more. School had become routine now, almost comfortable. Sarah maintained solid grades, led the robotics team to 2 more competition wins, and even joined Kelsey's film club where they watched and discussed movies. She was building a life, piece by piece, that felt like it belonged to her. The upcoming spring dance was causing a stir at school. Sarah had no intention of going until Marcus cornered her at lunch, his expression determined. "You're going to the dance," he announced. Not quite a question. "I am?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You are?" Because that was what humanity did best. Humans survived. They adapted. They took the worst experiences imaginable and found ways to keep going, to build something meaningful from the ashes of who they used to be. That was the real story worth telling, not the glory of battle, but the quiet courage of aftermath. Sarah closed her eyes, finally feeling something close to peace. The war had changed her, carved away parts of who she was, and replaced them with scars and hard-won wisdom. She would never be the naive 17-year-old who had walked into that recruitment center. That girl was gone forever. But in her place was someone stronger, someone who understood the true cost of survival and chose to pay it anyway. Someone who had seen the worst of humanity in combat and was now witnessing the best of humanity in healing and connection, in the stubborn refusal to let trauma have the final word. The plastic stars glowed softly above her and Sarah smiled. She had traveled to real stars, fought under alien suns, and carried burdens that should have broken her. Now she was home, truly home. Not because the place had changed, but because she had finally found a way to exist in it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be bad days ahead, moments when the past reached out and dragged her back into darkness. Recovery was not linear, and she would stumble many more times. But she had learned something crucial in these 3 months, something that made all the difference. She was not alone. She had people who understood, who supported her, who saw her as she was now and did not ask her to be anything else. She had purpose beyond survival, projects to build, and stories to tell, and a future that extended beyond the next firefight. And most importantly, she had herself. The core of who Sarah Chen was had survived intact, buried beneath layers of trauma but not destroyed. She was rebuilding herself around that core, creating someone new who honored both the soldier and the girl, the warrior and the engineer, the survivor and the friend. That was the truth she wanted other veterans to understand. You could not go back to who you were before. That door was closed, and trying to force it open only caused more pain. But you could go forward. You could build something new, something that incorporated your experiences without being defined by them. Sarah thought about the speech she would give at future conferences, the book she would write, the veterans she would help. This was her new mission, and unlike the chaotic missions in the war, this one had a clear purpose. Help others find their way home. Show them it was possible to survive the after, not just the during. She thought about Kelsey's cousin, the 17-year-old who wanted to enlist. Maybe she would talk to him, not to discourage him, but to ensure he understood what he was signing up for. If he chose to serve anyway, at least he would go in with eyes open, and when he came back changed, he would know that others had walked this path and survived it. The house was quiet around her, her parents asleep in their room down the hall. Safe. Everyone was safe. Sarah repeated this to herself whenever the hypervigilance crept in, whenever her soldier brain started calculating threats that did not exist. Safe. She pulled out her phone and opened the group chat with the robotics team. Priya had posted photos from the dance, goofy pictures of all of them making ridiculous faces. Sarah looked at her own face in those photos and saw something she had not expected. Joy. Genuine, uncomplicated joy. She saved the photos to her favorites, adding them to a growing collection of good moments. Dr. Martinez had suggested this, creating a visual record of positive experiences to reference during difficult times. Proof that life contained more than trauma, that happiness was possible even after everything. Sarah set her phone aside and settled deeper into her pillow. Sleep came easier now than it had in the early days. The nightmares still visited occasionally, but they no longer owned her nights. She had learned techniques to ground herself when she woke gasping, ways to remind her body that the war was over, even if her mind sometimes forgot. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah's last thought was about the future. Not the distant future of careers and families, but the immediate future of tomorrow. She would wake up. She would face whatever challenges the day brought. She would connect with people who mattered to her. She would work on projects that gave her purpose. She would take one more step forward in this journey of rebuilding. And the day after that, she would do it again, and again, and again. Until the steps became easier, until the path became clearer, until the person she was building became someone she could be proud of. The girl who came back from war had faced her different battle at school and was winning, slowly but surely. Not through overwhelming force or tactical superiority, but through persistence, connection, and the very human refusal to surrender even when the fight seemed impossible. That, Sarah decided in the gentle darkness of her room, was the most human thing of all. To face impossible odds, to carry unbearable weight, to survive what should have destroyed you, and to choose, every single day, to keep building a life worth living. She had fought for humanity among the stars. Now she was fighting for her own humanity here on Earth. Both battles were hard. Both battles mattered, and she was determined to win them both, one small victory at a time. Sarah smiled into the darkness and let sleep take her, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, because she was stronger than she knew, more resilient than she believed, and more human than the war had tried to make her forget. And that was enough. It had to be enough, because it was all any of them had. This stubborn human determination to survive and thrive despite everything trying to break them. The girl who came back from war was finally coming home. The robotics team is going as a group, and you're part of the team. No arguments. Marcus crossed his arms. You can't skip every social event forever. At some point, you have to participate in the ridiculous ritual of teenage life. I don't dance, Sarah protested weakly. Neither do I, Priya chimed in. That's not the point. The point is showing up, being present, making memories that aren't about robots or war. Come on, Sarah, live a little. Looking around the table, at the faces of people who had become genuine friends, Sarah felt her resistance crumble. They were not asking her to pretend to be someone she was not. They were asking her to show up as herself and be part of something normal. That was something she could try. Fine, Sarah agreed. But if anyone asks me to dance, I'm blaming you when I step on their feet. The night of the dance, Sarah stood in her room staring at the dress her mother had helped her pick out. It was simple and dark blue, nothing fancy, but it felt foreign on her body. She was used to uniforms or jeans, not dresses and heels. But she had promised to go, so she would go. The gymnasium was transformed with lights and decorations that made it almost unrecognizable. Music pounded from speakers, and students clustered in groups, some dancing, most just talking and laughing. Sarah felt her anxiety spike at the crowd and noise, but Marcus appeared at her elbow immediately. Stick with us, he said simply. We claimed a corner. There's snacks and it's not too loud. The robotics team had indeed claimed a corner of the gym, setting up camp with chairs and refreshments like they were planning a siege. Sarah found herself relaxing as she joined them, the familiar faces and easy conversation grounding her. Kelsey dragged her onto the dance floor eventually, refusing to take no for an answer. Sarah moved awkwardly to the music, feeling ridiculous and exposed, but Kelsey just laughed and kept dancing with such unself-conscious joy that Sarah found herself laughing too. It was silly and stupid and completely normal, and for a few minutes Sarah forgot to be a veteran struggling with reintegration. She was just a 20-year-old at a school dance, having fun with friends. Later, as the dance was winding down, the principal announced a special recognition. Sarah felt her stomach drop as he called her name, asking her to come to the stage. She walked up on shaky legs, having no idea what was happening. Sarah Chen has shown remarkable courage both on the battlefield and here at home, Principal Dawson said, his voice carrying through the microphone. She has shared her experiences with honesty and grace, helped lead our robotics team to victory, and demonstrated what it means to serve your community in multiple ways. On behalf of Lincoln High School, we want to present her with this year's Courage Award. He handed Sarah a plaque and the gymnasium erupted in applause. Sarah stood there overwhelmed as her classmates cheered for her. Not because she had been to war, but because of who she had become after. It was recognition not of her trauma, but of her resilience. She managed to mumble a thank you before escaping back to her friends, her face burning. Marcus pulled her into a side hug, and Priya whistled loudly, and Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. It was acceptance, real and unconditional, and it felt like coming home.